One of the things I think that's really fascinating about you, as we talked about you being a producer, is you also were in a band with arguably one of the other most successful producers of all time, which is Brian Eno. And you got to see Brian Eno develop not only from a, what I've seen you affectionately call in other interviews the weirdo behind the soundboard into arguably one of the most successful producers of the 20th century. What was his
Yeah.
development like as far as a producer? Because you also worked with him on his first two solo records, and you've done various projects with him over the years, and you've worked with him past the
Mm.
you know working with U2 and all the great band Coldplay and stuff he's worked with. What made him different than other producers, and what was his development like into becoming this mega house producer?
Well, I, to a certain extent, let's go back to the kind of producer he is. Again, he's not a hands-on producer in terms of like touching all the desks, although he could do, and he knows what to do. Um, he thinks conceptually, as I said before. He thinks about what are we doing here. Uh, is that not working? Perhaps we should try it a totally different way. And so he sort of pulls the carpet from underneath maybe some musicians. Well, they invariably get him in because they got to a point in their career where they think, well, I'm just going to repeat the last album or something like that. So let's get Brian in, and he will come up with a new method of working. You see, and that goes back to his art school training and the kind of person who taught him at art school, which was the same guy who taught, I think he's called Roy Ascott or something, who taught Pete Townsend, for instance. So, you know, it's an approach to the creative process, which he brings, which is unique, and that hasn't changed since I first met him. To things he's saying now is the things he was saying back then, and putting it into practice. Which I was lucky enough in the between 1971 and 76 or so uh, to be with him in his little apartment with tape recorders and things, using the tech that was available at the time and trying to come up with new sounds and new ways of doing things. Those kind of experiments he's put into practice when it came to working with you know Bowie, firstly in 75, 76. And that was an evolution of all the things that we were doing at Basing Street Studios on his solo albums and things like that. And he was learning, absorbing how the modern recording studio worked in those days. Uh, Again, you're talking about the beginnings of 24 track, 2-inch recording and the limitations of it. And so, we were we wanted something weird. So we'd get a broomstick and take the tape way over there and make it huge, a long distance between that and the capstan, and putting sticky tape on the capstan of the without the studio manager knowing that, because we would have been up and out of it. So doing all these kind of like putting nails in screws into pianos and things that were being sort of he had seen and we had all heard about in avant-garde music and systems electronic music and between the like 1940s and 1960s, where there was limited amount of electronic stuff, and it was all being done in a sort of organic, what we call a Heath Robinson method, very British sort of way of looking around you and saying, well, what have we got here? Right. Well, I've got a pen and I've got a bottle and I've got a piece of wood. Let's use it somehow to do something weird and interesting, that you're not meant to, and let's to do. So it's that approach which becomes invaluable, I think, when he then goes on to work with what, to a certain extent, were conventional rock bands, U2 and Coldplay and James and all that. Well, Bowie were just doing songs, if you like, but adding this other dimension to their stuff, and of course it blew their minds. Quite frankly, it changed the way they worked, and so they were very appreciative uh, about that. And it was very luckily it was very successful because they had the tunes. And again, as I said, if you work with incredibly talented people like they all were and wrote great songs and great melodies and great words, then you're adding on to something and steering the ship into port very well. And he's good at that.